I've told this story maybe 40 times now. Pubs, family dinners, once to a bloke on a train who didn't ask. And every single time I get to the same part and my voice does this stupid thing where it cracks. 40 times, you'd think I'd be over it. I'm not over it. Because I was standing about 9 feet away when a little girl in a wheelchair raised her hand to salute a royal guard. And what that man did next broke every rule they'd hammered into him. I watched a soldier throw away the thing he'd been trained his whole career to protect. And I've never seen anyone do a braver thing in my life. Let me back up properly from the start. My name's Desmond Whitmore. Everyone calls me Des. I drove a black cab in London for 26 years, and then my back gave out the way backs do, and suddenly I had a camera and a bus pass and absolutely nothing to do with my Tuesdays. So I started photographing the guards. I know, cliché. Every tourist with a phone does it. But there's a difference between snapping a photo and watching, and after 2 or 3 years of standing at those railings, I'd started to see things most people walked straight past. I knew, for instance, that the guards blink. Obviously they blink, but they blink in a rhythm, and when a guard's rhythm goes off, something's happening in his head. I knew that the good ones have a spot they stare at, a specific brick, a specific bit of sky, and they hold it like a rope in a storm. I knew which ones were nervous. Which ones had done this 100 times, which ones were counting the minutes. I'd never spoken to a single one of them, not once in 3 years, that's not how it works. But I'd learned to read them the way you learn to read weather. It was the 17th of July. I remember because it was my late wife's birthday, and I always go out with the camera on her birthday rather than sit in the flat feeling sorry for myself. The heat that day was ridiculous. Proper London heat, the kind that has nowhere to go. The air sat on top of you like a wet coat. The pavement threw it back up at your face. You could smell the tarmac going soft, that sweet chemical smell, and somewhere behind the trees a road crew had been drilling since 7:30 in the morning. That drill matters, remember the drill. The tourists were 3 deep at the railings. Sunburnt shoulders, bucket hats. A man from Ohio explaining the British Monarchy loudly and almost entirely wrongly to his teenage sons who wanted to be literally anywhere else on Earth. Someone's ice cream had gone over the railings and was slowly becoming a modern art installation on the flagstones. And behind all that noise, in a sentry box that must have been 100 degrees inside, stood the guard. I want to be honest with you about him, because later on people made him into a sort of storybook character, and he wasn't. He was a young man having a rough day. 24, 25 maybe, tall, that red tunic buttoned to his throat in weather that would have dropped a horse, bearskin pulled low. The chin strap sitting on his lip the way it does, which is one of the small cruelties of that uniform. It means you can't lick your lips, can't wipe your mouth, can't do any of the little things your body begs you to do when you're baking. I'd seen him before, twice, maybe 3 times earlier that summer. I'd never learned his name, didn't expect to, but I'd noticed him because of the eyes. He had these very pale gray eyes, and he'd got that habit I mentioned, the rope-in-a-storm stare. But his spot wasn't a brick. His spot was low, down, and slightly left near the pavement, which is odd. Most of them stare high. Staring high means you don't have to look at faces. He stared low, like he was watching for something to arrive. I remember thinking that at the time. And I remember dismissing it, because I'm a nosy old cabbie who invents stories about strangers, and if you'd told me it meant something, I'd have laughed at you. It meant everything. The girl arrived at about 2:20. I heard her before I saw her, not her voice, the chair. Those wheels have a sound on old paving stones, this fast TK over the joins, and it was coming quick, faster than a chair should move in a crowd. I turned, and there she was, absolutely flying, elbows pumping, a woman jogging behind her with a rucksack and an expression I recognized immediately. Every parent of a determined kid has that face. It's love and exhaustion and pleas, not in front of everyone all at once. The girl was small, 9, 10. Hard to tell because kids in chairs often look younger than they are, and this one was skinny in that way that makes you think hospital before you think slim. Dark hair cut short and a bit uneven, like it had grown back in on its own terms rather than been styled. Freckles all over her nose. A green cardigan buttoned up in that heat, which told you something on its own. And on her lap, flat under both hands like it was going to blow away, was a folded piece of paper. She was steering with her elbows. She got to the railings and she didn't stop and look around the way people do. She'd already decided where she was going. She went straight down the line, past the family from Ohio, past a Spanish tour group, past me, and she pulled up at the sentry box like she had an appointment. Her mum caught up, out of breath, hair stuck to her forehead. "Nell," she said. "Nell, love, wait." Nell. That was the first time I heard her name, and I've never been able to hear it since without something happening in my chest. Now, here's what you need to understand about that particular stretch of railing. There's a rhythm to it. The tourists come, the guard does his patrol, that long walk up and back, the boots coming down like a metronome. And every time he moves, there's this ripple of phones going up, and a little collective gasp, and then it's over and everyone drifts and the next lot arrive. 2 minutes of attention and then people move on. It's a conveyor belt. Nell did not move on. She parked, she locked her wheels. And she sat there, absolutely still, facing that sentry box, and she waited. 5 minutes, 10. The Ohio family came and went. The Spanish tour group came and went. A German couple, a school trip, a man with a parrot on his shoulder. I'm not making that up. There was genuinely a man with a parrot. Nell didn't move. Her mum tried gently about 3 separate times. I could hear bits of it. "Sweetheart, he's not allowed to." "I know. They're not permitted to." "Mums, I know." Not rude, not a strop. Just this flat, tired patience, like she'd had this conversation before and lost it before and wasn't losing it today. And then quieter, so quiet I only got it because the drill had paused for a second. "I'm not asking him to do anything. I just want to do it properly." Her mum went quiet after that. She stepped back a bit and stood with her arms folded, and she watched her daughter's back, and I saw her mouth pull sideways in that way people's mouths do when they're not going to cry in public. Absolutely not, no chance. I looked away, felt like I was intruding. Around 2:45, I noticed the guard. Not what he was doing, what he'd stopped doing. That spot he stared at, the low one down and left, he'd stopped staring at it. He was staring at the girl. Now you have to understand how big that is. They look through you. That's the whole thing. 20,000 people a day walk past those men, and every single one of them gets looked through like glass. Grown adults pull faces, do dances, shout, propose marriage. Nothing, it's like performing for a lighthouse. This lad was looking at her. Not obviously. If you didn't spend your Tuesdays doing what I do, you'd never have caught it. It was maybe 2 degrees off. Just enough that the line of his stare landed on her instead of past her. And his blink rhythm had gone to pieces. I got my camera up. Didn't take a picture. Just used the long lens like a telescope because I'm nosy and because something in my gut had started making a noise. Through the lens, I could see the sweat coming off him, down the temple into the strap. There was a tremor in his jaw, and his eyes were doing that thing eyes do when they are trying very hard to stay dry and losing. I thought, he's going down. I've seen guards go down before. It happens more than people realize. They drop like felled trees, straight back, no hands out, and I thought, right, that's it. This poor sod's about to faint in front of 200 phones. I actually looked round for the nearest steward. That's how wrong I was. I've thought about that a lot since. I was standing there congratulating myself on being the one bloke in the crowd who noticed something, and I'd read it exactly backwards. He wasn't fainting. He was recognizing her. At about 3 o'clock, Nell unfolded the paper. The whole crowd didn't notice. 2 people noticed. Me and a Dutch girl next to me who'd been watching Nell for a while and had gone very quiet. Nell smoothed the paper on her lap. Flattened the creases with the side of her hand, careful, twice, the way you do with something that matters, and she looked at it, lips moving. She was rehearsing. I've never wanted to know what's on a piece of paper so badly in my entire life. Then she folded it again, tucked it down beside her hip, and she put her hands on her armrests and she pushed. She was trying to sit up straighter. That's the bit that got me. She wasn't standing, she couldn't. But she was doing the version of standing that was available to her. Shoulders back, chin up. She got her spine as straight as it would go and she held it, and I could see her arms shaking with the effort, and she held it anyway. Her mum said Nell, and Nell said please, and her mum stopped. And then that little girl raised her right hand and saluted. I want to describe it properly, because people always picture it wrong. It wasn't a wobbly kid's salute. It wasn't cute. Somebody had taught her, and they'd taught her right, fingers flat and together, thumb tucked in tight along the edge of the hand, elbow up and out, the tip of her middle finger landing just at the corner of her eyebrow. Sharp. Correct. And she held it. That's the thing, she held it. You salute and you wait, don't you? You wait to be released. That's the entire point of it. It's not a wave, it's a question. You hold it until the other person answers. She held it. The crowd went quiet in stages. It's a strange thing to witness. It started with the people right next to her and moved outward like something dropped in a pond. The Dutch girl beside me lowered her phone. A dad down the line put a hand on his son's shoulder without looking at him. Even the drill behind the trees chose that moment to stop, and the silence rushed in so fast it felt like the air had been sucked out. Nell's arm started to tremble almost immediately. 10 seconds, 15. Her arm was shaking hard enough to see from where I stood. Her jaw was locked. She'd gone white around the mouth. 30 seconds. Somebody behind me whispered, "Oh, love, he can't." And they were right, he couldn't, that's the whole point. That man is not permitted to return a salute to a civilian, not to a child, not to anyone. He stands his post and he doesn't respond to the crowd, because the second he starts responding to the crowd, he isn't standing a post anymore, he's doing a show. There are actual rules, real consequences. Blokes have been disciplined for less than a smile. 40 seconds. Her arm was going. You could see it dying by degrees, the elbow sinking a centimeter at a time while she fought to drag it back up. Tears were coming down her face now, not sobbing, no noise at all, just water running while her expression stayed completely, furiously still. She'd made a promise to somebody, I was sure of it. I didn't know who or why, but you don't fight like that for nothing. 50 seconds. Her mum broke first, stepped forward, hand out. "Nell, that's enough, darling, please." "No. One word." Bitten off, and that woman stopped like she'd hit a wall, because there are moments when your child stops being your child for a second and becomes an entire separate human being with something to do, and every parent in that crowd recognized it, and nobody moved. A minute. I had my camera up and I wasn't taking pictures. I'd forgotten I owned it. My hands were doing something on their own. And the guard's stare had come off his fixed point entirely. I could see his chest going. Deep, controlled, forced, the breathing they teach you when your body wants to do something and you're not going to let it. His mouth had come apart very slightly under that strap, and his eyes were absolutely streaming. Not from heat. I've seen 100 guards sweat. Sweat comes off the temple and goes down the side. This was coming from the inside corners of his eyes and going straight down his cheeks in 2 clean lines, and there is only one thing on this earth that makes that pattern. That man was crying, standing at attention in full ceremonial kit in front of 200 strangers in blazing sunshine, and he was crying, and he was not permitted to lift a hand to do anything about it. And he stood there. That's what nobody understands about that job. Everyone thinks the hard bit is standing still. Standing still isn't hard. Standing still while something is happening to you, that's the hard bit. That's the whole job. That's the thing. 70 seconds. Nell's arm dropped about 3 inches and she caught it, dragged it back. I heard her make a sound, this small, cracked noise through her teeth. And I thought, she is going to hold that salute until her body physically fails. She was not going to stop. Not for her mum, not for the crowd, not for the pain. She'd come here to do one thing and she was going to do it or fall over trying. 80 seconds. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman was crying openly now. Nobody was filming anymore. 200 phones all down all at once. I've never seen that. Not once. Not before, not since. And then, the guard moved his foot. Just his foot, just the right one. He slid it maybe 4 inches to the side. And the whole crowd made this noise, this sort of soft, involuntary oh. Because that's the beginning of a movement. Every one of us had watched those men march enough times to know it. The foot goes first. He was going to do something. His hand came off the rifle. I heard the sound of it, that leather-on-wood scrape, and it was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. His white-gloved hand came off the weapon and hung in the air at his side. Nell's arm was collapsing, down to her ear now, fingers still flat, still holding, still asking. And I remember thinking, very clearly, with my heart going like a hammer, "Son, don't, you'll lose everything." Because he would. That's not drama, that's just true. There'd be an investigation, there'd be a newspaper, there'd be a sergeant and a hearing and a career that took him 6 years to build gone in a photograph. All of it. For a stranger's kid at a railing. His shoulders came back. His chin came up. And the world went white. I don't have a better word for it. There was a sound that wasn't a sound, it was a hit, like being slapped on both ears at once. And then a shove of air went through that crowd and knocked people flat, and I was on the pavement with my camera under me and no memory of falling. Behind the trees, where the road crew had been drilling since 7:30 that morning, a gas main had let go. Later there'd be a report. Old iron pipe aggravated by works, a catastrophic ignition event. 2 workmen with burns, nobody killed, thank God, a hole in the road you could have buried a car in. That's later, that's the tidy version. In the moment there was just white and ringing, and the smell of burning and 200 people screaming and running in every direction at once. And somewhere in all of it, a woman was shrieking a name over and over, Nell, N-E-L-L. And the crowd was surging back from the blast in one solid wall of bodies. And I was on my hands and knees on hot flagstones with blood coming out of my ear, trying to see. And I saw it. I'll see it till the day I die. The crowd was running backwards, away from the trees, straight at the railings. 200 panicking adults, all mass and no thought, coming down on a locked wheelchair with a child in it, and her mother 40 feet away on the wrong side of it, screaming. And that girl couldn't move. Her wheels were locked, her arm was still half up. She was about to be trampled. And through the smoke, through the ringing, through the screaming, I saw a red tunic moving. Not away from it. Into it. People ask me what an explosion sounds like. It doesn't sound like anything. That's the honest answer. Your ears don't have time to do their job. There's a pressure, like the world slamming a door, and then there's nothing at all, this thick, wadded silence. And then, slowly, the screaming fades up through it like somebody turning a dial. I was on my knees on the flagstones. My camera was under my chest, and the lens was cracked, and I remember being furious about that, which tells you something about how the brain works when it's had a shock. 2 workmen were on fire behind the trees, and I was upset about a lens. There was a taste in my mouth, copper and burnt sugar and something chemical. And there was the ringing. God, the ringing, like a kettle that never stops boiling. Then I got my head up. The smoke was coming through the trees in a wall. Not black, gray-brown, thick, low, rolling along the ground like something alive. And it hit the crowd, and the crowd broke. I want you to picture this properly, because this is the bit that still wakes me up. 200 people had been standing at those railings, sunburnt, happy, holding phones and ice creams. And in about 2 seconds, all of them became one thing, one animal, and that animal ran. It didn't run away from the railings. That's what people always assume. It ran at them. The blast was behind in the trees. So everybody went the only direction their legs would take them. Backwards. Towards the fence, towards the palace, towards the one solid wall of iron in the whole open space. 200 bodies, all mass, no thought, coming down the pavement like a tide. And parked right in the middle of it, wheels locked, arms still half raised, was a 10-year-old girl who could not move. Her mother was gone. Not gone, she was 40 feet away on the wrong side of the surge, and I could see her in flashes between shoulders. Arms out, mouth open, that sound coming out of her. N-E-L-L, N-E-L-L, N-E-L-L. She was trying to swim upstream through people twice her size, and the crowd was just deleting her, shoving her back. Every step forward she got knocked 2 back. I watched a man in a rugby shirt put his elbow across her collarbone without even seeing her, and send her into the railings. I tried to get up. I want that on the record, not because it makes me look good, it doesn't, but because it's true. I got 1 foot under me and someone's knee caught me in the shoulder and I went down again, and by the time I was up on my hands, the tide had already gone past me. I was 9 feet away and I was useless. I've had 3 years to make peace with that, still working on it. Because I could see her. She had her hands up, not to salute anymore, just up flat the way you do when something's coming and you know it's too late to stop it. Her mouth was open, She wasn't screaming. She'd gone completely silent. And they were on top of her. Now, here's where I have to tell you something, and I've argued about it with people who weren't there, and I don't care what they think. The nearest sentry box was behind the railings, locked side, palace side. There's a gate down the line, there's always a gate, that's how they get in and out at the change, but it was shut, and it was 30-odd feet from where he stood, and between him and that gate was solid iron. He did not go to the gate. I know what I saw. I saw a red tunic go up. He came over the railings. I've had ex-servicemen tell me that's impossible in that kit. Bearskin, tunic, boots, rifle, you don't vault iron in that. And I say, mate, I was 9 feet away with blood coming out of my ear and I watched him do it. The bearskin went first. It came off his head and hit the pavement and rolled. And the second it did, this whole thing happened that I didn't have time to think about at the time. He was just a lad. That's all. Without the hat, he was just a young bloke with sweaty ginger hair flattened to his skull, 24 years old, with a red face and tears still wet on it. The rifle went next. He didn't drop it, he placed it. I remember that. Even then, some part of his training had him lay that weapon down against the box instead of letting it clatter. A half second, habit going down fighting. And then he was over. Boots hit the flagstones, he didn't stumble, and he went into that crowd like a man walking into surf. You have to understand what he was walking into. 200 people running at you. There's no reasoning with that. It's not people anymore, it's weather. He put his shoulder down and he went through it. He didn't shove anyone, that's the thing I remember. He wasn't fighting them. He was carving. He got his left arm up across his own chest, dropped his weight, and just insisted. Bodies came off him and went round him. A woman bounced off his shoulder and spun away. A bloke with a rucksack hit him square on and went sideways into the fence. He never took his eyes off that chair. Not once, not for a second. 4 strides, 5. And someone went down in front of him. A teenage girl tripped, and she was about to go under 200 pairs of feet, and he stopped. He stopped. In the middle of that, with Nell about to be crushed 9 feet ahead of him. He stopped, and he grabbed that teenager by the back of her jacket and hauled her up onto her feet and shoved her towards the railings where there was space. And then he went on. I've thought about that half-second more than almost anything else in this story. Because he had exactly one thing in the world he wanted to reach, and he still stopped for someone he didn't know. That's not training. You can't train that. That's just what was inside him. He got to Nell about 1.5 seconds before the crowd did. And he didn't pick her up. That surprised me at the time, and it doesn't now. Later I found out why. You don't lift a kid like Nell by the arms. Not with what was going on in her spine. You can do real damage, but I don't think he was thinking about that. I think it was simpler. He got behind the chair. He put his back to the crowd, both hands on the handles, and he leaned forward over her, right over her, chest against the back of the chair, his arms coming down either side of her shoulders and his hands gripping the frame, and he made himself into a roof. And then he held. I watched 200 people hit that man. Not one at a time, all at once. A wall of them. His head went down and his shoulders came up and I heard the sound they made hitting him, this awful, soft, heavy thud, 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 like sacks off a lorry. He didn't move. I don't mean he stood firm heroically. I mean he didn't move. He'd set his feet, one forward, one back, the way you do, and he'd locked, and the crowd came off him and split around that chair like water round a rock. Somebody's shoe caught him across the back of the skull. I saw his head snap forward and come back up. His hand stayed on the frame. 12 seconds, maybe 15. That's all it lasted. It felt like 10 minutes. And when it thinned out, when the last stragglers stumbled past and the pavement opened up and there was suddenly this ragged, smoky, ringing quiet, he was still there. Bent over that chair, breathing like a bellows, blood coming out of his hairline and down past his ear. And underneath him, absolutely fine, not a mark on her, was Nell. Her mum got there. Of course she did. Went past me at a speed I wouldn't have believed and hit her knees on the flagstones so hard I heard it, and grabbed at her daughter's face with both hands, saying her name over and over, that thing parents do where the name stops being a word and turns into a noise. The guard straightened up. He let go of the handles and he stepped back, 2 steps, exactly 2, And I swear to you the second one was a proper parade step, heel down, because that's what was in him and it was all still running even with a split head. And he stood there with his arms at his sides and his chest heaving and blood on his collar, looking at that little girl. And Nell looked up at him. Not at her mum, at him. Her face was gray, her hands were shaking in her lap. And she looked up at that lad, really looked, the way you look at someone when you're checking something, and I watched her eyes go across his face like she was reading it. Then she said something. It was quiet, my ears were shot, I got maybe half of it. She said, "It's you." He came apart. I've never seen a person do that so fast. 1 second he's a soldier standing in wreckage and the next his face just collapsed. Everything at once. His mouth went and his eyes went and he put one white glove up over the lower half of his face and his shoulders started going. He got down, went down on one knee first, then both, right there on the hot flagstones next to that chair, and he put his forehead down against the armrest, against her armrest, and he cried like I have not heard a grown man cry in my entire life. Great, ugly, tearing sounds, not a soldier crying, not a man being brave about it. Just a person breaking out loud in front of everyone. And Nell put her hand on the back of his head. 10 years old. She'd just nearly been trampled to death. And she put her little hand on the back of that lad's bleeding head, very gently, the way you'd calm a dog, and she said, and this bit I heard clearly because everything had gone so quiet. It's all right, you came. I didn't understand any of it. Not then. I was standing there with a broken lens and blood in my ear thinking, why does she know him? Why does he know her? What in God's name is happening? It took me 11 days to find out. And I found out the same way I've found out everything in my life, which is by being unbearably nosy and refusing to let go. I'll give you the short version. 3 years before that day, a corporal named Jonah Hardy had died. Not in a war, that's the bit that always throws people. There wasn't a battle. There wasn't a story worth a headline. He was 22 years old and he was on a training exercise in the Brecon Beacons in February, and there was weather, and there was a river crossing, and there was a decision made by somebody further up the chain that turned out to be the wrong one, and a rope went. And Jonah Hardy went into water that was 2 degrees above freezing. 3 lads went in, 2 came out. Jonah didn't. There was an inquest, there were findings. There was a paragraph in one newspaper and nothing in any of the others. He had a mum called Sarah, and he had a little sister called Nell who was 7 and who worshipped the actual ground he walked on. Nell wasn't born in that chair. She had a condition. I'm not going to pretend I understand the medicine. It's a long word and it's degenerative, and it took her legs from her over about 4 years slowly, the way those things do. And her big brother, who had a proper job in a proper uniform and could have been anywhere on his leave, spent his leave with her. He taught her the salute. That's what the family told me. He'd come home in his blues and he'd stand her hand up and correct her fingers, flat together, thumb tucked, elbow up, and he'd tell her she was the worst soldier he'd ever trained and she'd tell him to shut up and they'd do it again. And again, until she had it perfect. And he told her something, apparently, about holding it. He told her, you never drop a salute till the other bloke lets you go. 7 years old, she held that in her head for 3 years. And the guard, his name was Rory Teague, guardsman 24. He was in that river. He was one of the 2 who came out. He was the one who had hold of Jonah Hardy's webbing when the water took him, and he was the one whose fingers opened, because fingers do in water that cold, whether you tell them to or not. There was an inquiry. Rory Teague was found to have done nothing wrong. Not a thing. It's on the record. He was 19 years old and the water was 2 degrees and there is not a hand on this earth that holds on in that. Findings don't do much, do they? Not to the man they're about. He wrote to Sarah Hardy 3 times. She told me that herself, sitting in her kitchen with the letters in a drawer she couldn't open. 3 letters from a 19-year-old lad trying to explain something that has no explanation. She never answered. She said she couldn't back then. She said she was so angry at the whole world that she couldn't work out which bit to be angry at, so she just closed the drawer. And he never came. He meant to. He told me that later when he could talk about it. He said he stood outside their front gate in Nuneaton twice. Twice. Once in the rain. And both times he got as far as the gate and his legs stopped working and he went back to the station and got on a train. He said, "What was I going to say? I'm the one who let go. Here's the part that finishes me." Nell had been coming to that railing for 3 years. Every summer, twice, 3 times a summer. Her mum would take her down on the coach because it was cheap, and she'd wheel her to the railings, and Nell would sit there and wait for a change of guard, and then she'd salute. She didn't know which one. That's the thing, she never knew which one. She'd never been told a name. Sarah had kept all of it away from her, all the inquest, all the letters, all of it, because she was 7. All Nell knew was that somewhere in that regiment there were men who'd known her brother. So she'd salute them, all of them, whichever one was standing there, because as far as that little girl was concerned, they were all Jonah's mates, and Jonah's mates deserved a proper salute. And every single time, for 3 years, they looked through her. Because that's the job, that's the rule, that's what the man is standing there to do. 20, 30 times, that kid raised her hand at those railings and nobody ever answered. And Rory Teague knew her face. That's why he stared low, down and slightly left, near the pavement. Because he'd seen her the summer before, and the summer before that. He'd stood in that box with her 9 feet away and her hand up, and he had known who she was, and he had looked straight through her, because his orders were his orders. He told me it was the worst thing he'd ever done. He said, "I've been in a river with a lad's kit in my hand, and the worst thing I ever did was look through his sister." And every shift after that, he'd stared at the pavement, watching for a wheelchair. Not hoping, dreading and hoping both at once, the way people do. So back to the flagstones. Smoke everywhere, sirens starting up in the distance. 200 people scattered and shaking, and some of them bleeding, a hole in the road behind the trees. And in the middle of it, a soldier on his knees with his head against a wheelchair and a little girl's hand on his hair. And then Rory Teague stood up. He got himself off that pavement, took him 2 goes, and he stood, and he pulled his tunic straight with both hands. Blood all down his neck, hair everywhere, no bearskin, no rifle, half his buttons gone. Worst turned-out guardsman in the history of the British Army. He stepped back from that chair, 1 pace. And he came to attention. I want you to hear it, heel to heel, in that silence on those stones, crack. Everyone still standing turned round. And Nell, bless her, she knew exactly what was coming. I saw it go across her face like a light. Nell shoved herself upright in that chair with everything she had left, shoulders back, chin up, arms shaking. And she brought her hand up, fingers flat, thumb tucked, elbow out. And Guardsman Rory Teague, in front of 100 people, on camera, on duty, in ruined kit, with everything he'd worked for since he was 18 years old, brought his own hand up and returned it. Nobody made a sound. Not a phone, not a whisper. 100 people, and you could hear the sirens coming. He held it, she held it. And then he did the thing that I still cannot talk about without stopping for a second. He held that salute, and he waited. Because he wouldn't drop it first. You never drop a salute till the other bloke lets you go. He stood there in the smoke, bleeding, 3 years too late, and he waited for a 10-year-old girl to release him. She did. She brought her hand down, slow, proper. And he brought his down after her. And that was it, that was the whole thing. 4 seconds, maybe. Then the police came through the trees, and everything turned into radios and high-vis and shouting. And 2 officers took hold of Rory Teague's arms, and a sergeant was coming across that pavement at a dead run with a face like thunder. Because as far as the British Army was concerned, what had just happened was not a beautiful thing. It was a guardsman who'd abandoned his post, dropped his weapon, and saluted a civilian. And they had it all on video. They took him by the arms. That's the image the world got, not the vault, not the roof he made of his own back, not the salute. 2 officers, 1 on each arm, walking a bleeding guardsman away from a wheelchair. And it was already on the internet before the ambulances arrived. I need to be fair to those coppers, because everyone was awful to them afterwards, and they didn't deserve it. They didn't know, nobody knew. There'd been an explosion in central London, and a soldier had come off his post and abandoned a weapon in a crowd, and if you're a police officer arriving into that, there's exactly one thing you do. You take hold of him. You'd be mad not to. One of them was about 23. I remember his face. He looked like he was going to be sick. And Rory Teague didn't resist. Course he didn't. He put his hands out before they asked, straightened himself up, went with them. But he turned his head. Walking away, blood down his collar, hair stuck up like a scarecrow, he turned and looked back at that chair. And Nell had her hand up again. Not a salute this time, just up. Just a small hand in the air, palm out, the way a kid waves at a train. He couldn't wave back, his hands were behind him. So he nodded at her, once sharp. And that was the last time those two saw each other for 4 months. The sergeant, God, that man. He came across that pavement like the wrath of God. Color Sergeant Michael Aveling, 29 years in, face like a clenched fist, and I braced myself because I thought he was going to tear that lad apart in front of everybody. He didn't say a word to Rory, walked straight past him. He went to the rifle. That weapon was propped against the sentry box exactly where Rory had placed it, and Aveling picked it up, and he checked it, cleared it, made it safe. Whatever it is they do, and I saw his shoulders come down about 2 inches. Because the lad had made it safe first, before he went over the railings. In that half-second, with a child about to be killed, Rory Teague's hands had done the last thing his training told them to do. Aveling stood there holding that rifle and looking at it. And then he looked up at the sky and said something under his breath, and I've always wondered what it was. Then he picked the bearskin up off the flagstones, brushed it off with his forearm properly, both sides, and tucked it under his arm and walked away. I didn't understand that at the time either. Later I did. That man was salvaging his soldier's kit, every last bit of it, because whatever was coming, he was going to make sure they couldn't say the boy left a mess. The video went up that night. It was rubbish quality. Some fella's phone from about 40 feet, shaky, half of it just the back of a bloke's head. You couldn't hear anything but screaming. But you could see the red tunic go over the railings. 11 million views in 5 days. And then it all started, and it was horrible. Because everyone had an opinion, everyone. People who'd never been within 400 miles of that pavement were absolutely certain about what had happened on it. He was a hero, he was a disgrace. He'd broken protocol. He'd endangered the public. He'd been right. He'd been wrong. 2 former officers went on television and disagreed with each other for 8 minutes. A newspaper found out he was the lad from the Brecon inquest and ran that on the front page, and I'll never forgive them for it. Never. They put the whole thing in, the river, the rope, the fingers, all of it, under a headline I won't repeat. Sarah Hardy read that headline in a Tesco. She told me that. Standing in a Tesco with a basket, 3 years after she buried her son, reading his name in a tabloid because someone thought it made a good angle. Nobody knew why he'd done it. That's the thing people forget now. For 11 days, nobody had the faintest idea. The story going round was that a soldier had saved a disabled child in a bomb scare, which is a lovely story and completely misses the point. Nobody knew about the salute. Nobody had it on film. The phones were all down. There were about 150 of us who'd seen a 10-year-old hold a salute for 83 seconds, and not one of us had a single frame of it. Including me. My lens was cracked across in the fall. Card was fine. I had 900 photos of guards doing nothing, not one of Nell. I've thought about that a lot. 3 years standing at those railings with a camera, congratulating myself on seeing things, and the one moment in my whole life worth seeing, I've got nothing. Not a picture. Just a memory that fades a bit every year and a mouth that won't shut up about it. Maybe that's why I tell it 40 times. Maybe I'm trying to keep it developed. So I went and found them. I'm not proud of how. I used cabbie tricks, the coach company, the school run, a woman in a post office who shouldn't have told me what she told me. It took 11 days and it was intrusive and I'd do it again. I knocked on a door in Nuneaton on a Wednesday evening in a shirt I'd ironed. And when Sarah Hardy opened it, I said, "Mrs. Hardy, my name's Desmond Whitmore. I was 9 feet away, and I need to know what I saw." She looked at me for about 4 seconds. Then she said, "You'd better come in. The kettle's on anyway." Their kitchen had a photograph on the wall. Young lad, ginger blonde, grinning in blues, with his arm round a little girl in a chair who was pulling the worst face I've ever seen a child pull. Corporal Jonah Hardy, 22 forever. Nell was at the table doing homework and did not look up when I came in because she was 10 and I was a boring old man, and that small, ordinary rudeness nearly finished me off. She was fine. She was completely fine. Homework and a glass of squash and a sticker on her wheelchair frame that said, "Sorry, I'm late. I didn't want to come." Sarah made tea, sat down, put both hands round the mug. And she said, "How much do you know?" I said, "I know she saluted. I know he cried. I know he came over the railings. I don't know why." And Sarah Hardy said, "Neither did I until 11 days ago." Then she said, "Nell, show him." Nell put her pen down. She reached into the pocket on the side of her chair, and she pulled out a piece of paper. The piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times it had gone soft at the creases, like cloth. There was a brown mark across one corner from the flagstones, and a wrinkle where the sweat off her hands had got into it. She held it out to me, didn't say anything, just held it out. And her mum said very quietly, "Go on, she wants you to." I've got a photocopy of it. Sarah gave me one years later when she decided the world had earned it, the original's in a frame now. It's in biro, blue, on lined paper torn out of a school exercise book. You can see the frilly bit down the side where she ripped it. The handwriting's careful, really careful, the sort of careful where you can tell someone's copied it out 4 times to get it neat. And it starts, "Dear Guardsman Teague." I looked up at Sarah and I couldn't speak. Because that meant she knew. That whole time, the wait, the 83 seconds, the arm shaking, the appointment she'd clearly had with that particular sentry box, that little girl had known exactly who she was saluting. She hadn't been saluting all of them. She'd found him. Sarah nodded. She'd gone very red round the eyes. She said, "The drawer. Here's what happened. About a year before that day, Nell was 9, and she was in the kitchen on her own, and she was looking for sellotape. And she opened the wrong drawer. 3 letters, different postmarks, same handwriting, all addressed to her mum, all opened once and shoved back. She read all 3. 9 years old, on her own in the kitchen. And she read 3 letters from a 19-year-old boy trying to explain how his fingers came open in a river. She put them back exactly how she found them. And she never said a word about it, not for a year, not one word. Sarah said, "She protected me. My 9-year-old protected me." And that was the first time she cried in front of me, and she was furious about it, and I pretended to look out the window. Nell had a name now. So she did what any determined kid with a laptop and an obsession does. She looked him up, found the inquest, found a regimental page, found eventually a photograph, some official thing, a line of lads at a parade, and she zoomed in until it went to squares, and she memorized a face. And then she started going to the railings looking for it. For a year, coach down, coach back, twice, 3 times, sitting at the fence in all weathers with her mum thinking her daughter just like the soldiers. She told her mum it was a Jonah thing, which was true in a way. Sarah never asked. And that hot Tuesday in July, she came round the corner and she saw gray eyes under a bearskin, and she went straight down that line like she had an appointment. Because she did.